Commander Zix Theta stood tall in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Defense Coalition. His forearms were crossed in the traditional Corvan stance of authority. The polished floors reflected the light from 1,000 floating orbs that illuminated the massive space. Representatives from 17 different worlds had gathered here, on the neutral station orbiting the dead star of Kepler 442. Each species had sent their finest military minds and their most decorated warriors. The Corvans were proud beings. They stood 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor that looked like polished black chitin. Their forearms made them deadly in close combat. For 3,000 years, they had been known as the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Zix Theta himself had won 47 battles without a single defeat. His warriors were disciplined, precise, and deadly. Around him, other species mingled and talked in low voices. The Silathi floated rather than walked, their translucent bodies shimmering with psychic energy. They were beings of pure thought who had evolved beyond the need for physical combat. Their minds were their weapons. A single Silathi could confuse an entire enemy squadron, making them see things that weren't there or forget why they were fighting. The Vorthak delegation stood apart from the others. They were living crystals, their bodies refracting light in rainbow patterns. They communicated through harmonic vibrations and could channel energy through their crystalline forms to create devastating beam weapons. They moved slowly but deliberately, each step calculated and perfect. The threat that had brought them together was serious. The Devourers had appeared from dark space 6 cycles ago. They consumed everything in their path, not just resources or technology but entire planets. 3 systems had already fallen. The coalition had been formed in desperation. Every species would contribute their military forces to create a united defense. "The humans are late," muttered Sub-Commander Kree, one of Zix Theta's officers. His mandibles clicked in disapproval. Typical of a species that only discovered faster-than-light travel 40 cycles ago. Zix Theta nodded. Humans were the newest members of the galactic community. They came from a world called Earth, which the databases classified as a Class 12 death world. Most species avoided such planets. The gravity was crushing, the weather was chaotic, and the biodiversity was hostile. How anything intelligent had evolved there was a mystery. The assembly hall's main doors suddenly opened. 3 humans walked in and the room fell silent. They were small compared to most species present, standing only 6 feet tall on average. They had no natural armor, no visible weapons integrated into their biology, and they walked on just 2 legs. Their skin was soft and vulnerable. Several species exchanged amused glances. The lead human was female according to the database. Admiral Sarah Chen, her uniform identified her. She had black hair tied back tightly and moved with a strange, efficient grace. Behind her walked Sergeant Major James Roberts, a male with skin the color of Terran soil and arms that seemed disproportionately muscled for his frame. Following them were 20 younger humans in matching gray clothing. "Apologies for our tardiness," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the translator systems. "We had to finish morning PT." The translator struggled with the term. Physical training. Zix Theta's confusion grew. They had delayed a crucial military summit for exercise? High Chancellor Vexera of the Silathi floated forward. Her telepathic voice touched everyone's minds gently. "Welcome, humans of Earth. We are honored by your presence, though we question what contribution such a young species can make to our coalition." Admiral Chen smiled. It was an expression that showed teeth, which Zix Theta found oddly disturbing. Among Corvans, showing teeth was a threat display. "We understand your concerns, Chancellor. We may be new to space travel, but humans have been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We've gotten quite good at it." "All species have conflict in their past," rumbled Crystallark Tom of the Vorthak, his harmonic voice resonating through the floor. "What matters is the sophistication of your current military capabilities." "Of course," Chen replied. "That's why we brought some of our recruits." "To demonstrate recruits?" Zix Theta studied the young humans. They stood in perfect lines, completely still despite having been standing for several minutes. Their eyes stared straight ahead, not moving even when other species walked past them. It was unnerving. "These are not even your trained soldiers?" asked Commander Rillix of the Altarian fleet. The Altarians were known for their naval excellence, their ships the fastest in known space. "Oh no," Sergeant Major Roberts spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stones. "These kids just started week 3 of basic training. Fresh recruits barely know which end of a rifle to point at the enemy, the assembly murmured. Sending untrained youth to a military demonstration was either insulting or foolish. Each species will demonstrate their combat readiness, announced High Chancellor Vexara. We must know each other's capabilities if we are to fight together effectively. The demonstrations began immediately. The Corvins went first, as was their right as the galaxy's premier warriors. 50 of Zix Theta's finest guards took the floor. They moved in perfect synchronization, their forearms weaving through combat forms that had been perfected over millennia. They struck at invisible enemies with plasma blades, blocked imaginary attacks, and moved as one organism. Their chitinous armor clicked and rattled in a rhythm that was both beautiful and terrifying. They demonstrated their endurance next. Corvin warriors could fight for 3 full-time units without rest. They proved it by maintaining combat stances while holding weighted training weapons. Not one warrior wavered. Not one showed fatigue. When they finished, the assembly applauded with various appendages, tentacles, and energy pulses. The Silathi were next. Their demonstration was quieter but no less impressive. 10 Silathi warriors floated to the center of the room. Without moving, they projected psychic energy that created visible distortions in the air. They showed how they could make enemies see multiple copies of themselves, how they could project fear directly into minds, and how they could coordinate complex battle strategies through pure thought. One Silathi made half the assembly believe for just a moment that the floor had turned to liquid. The illusion was perfect. The Vorthak demonstration was spectacular. Their crystalline warriors channeled energy through their bodies, creating laser beams that could cut through most known materials. They showed how they could resonate at frequencies that would shatter enemy equipment, and how their crystal bodies could refract energy weapons, making them nearly invulnerable to beam attacks. Species after species demonstrated their military might. The Altarians showed holographic recordings of their fleet maneuvers. The Dendari displayed their biological weapons, sprouting poisonous thorns and releasing toxic spores. The Mechanids demonstrated their ability to interface directly with any technology and turn enemy systems against them. Finally, it was humanity's turn. Admiral Chen stepped forward. We'll need to adjust the environmental controls for our demonstration. Adjust them? Asked High Chancellor Vexara. In what way? We need Earth normal conditions. 1 standard Earth gravity, 21% oxygen atmosphere, and a temperature of about 20 degrees Celsius. The assembly reacted with alarm. Earth gravity was 1 g, nearly double the galactic standard. The oxygen level was lower than most species preferred, and the temperature was uncomfortably cool. That's not safe, protested a Dendari representative, their plant-like form already wilting at the thought. Those conditions could harm many species here. We'll set up a contained field, Chen assured them. Just for the demonstration area. But our recruits can't perform properly in what you consider normal conditions. The gravity is too light, the air is too rich, and it's too warm. Zix Theta watched as the human recruits hadn't moved. They'd been standing at attention for over an hour now, completely motionless. Even Corvin warriors would have shifted by now, adjusted their stance, shown some sign of fatigue. But the humans stood like statues. The environmental field was established. Immediately, several species stepped back as they felt the edge of Earth conditions. The gravity alone made Zix Theta's exoskeleton creak. How did these soft, fragile-looking beings live in such crushing weight? Sergeant Major Roberts walked into the field. The recruits immediately snapped to an even straighter position if that was possible. Listen up, recruits, Roberts bellowed. The nice aliens want to see what human soldiers can do. Are you going to disappoint them? No, Sergeant Major, the recruits shouted in unison. The volume made several species flinch. I can't hear you. No, Sergeant Major. Good. Now let's show them what Earth's children are made of. Prepare for PT demonstration. The recruits moved as one, spreading out into precise formations. They waited, tension visible in their bodies like coiled springs. Zix Theta leaned forward, curious despite himself. What could these small, soft beings possibly show that would impress this assembly of the galaxy's finest warriors? He was about to find out why Earth was classified as a death world, and why its inhabitants were considered insane by every species that had studied them. Sergeant Major Roberts stood in the center of the environmental field, his presence somehow filling the space despite his relatively small size. The human recruits remained frozen in their positions, waiting for orders. The assembly of aliens watched with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Warm-up exercises, Roberts barked. Push-up position now. The 20 recruits dropped to the ground as one, faster than Zix Theta's eyes could properly follow. They balanced on their hands and feet, their bodies straight as beam weapons. The position looked uncomfortable and unstable. Down, up 1. Down, up 2. The recruits lowered their bodies until they nearly touched the ground, then pushed back up. Their arms shook slightly with effort. Sweat began to appear on their exposed skin, tiny droplets of moisture that their bodies produced for cooling. The Salathi representative's telepathic emanations radiated disgust. Secreting fluids was considered primitive and unclean by most civilized species. Keep going, Roberts commanded, walking among the recruits. My grandmother can do better push-ups, and she's been dead for 10 years. The recruits continued. 20, 30, 50. Their breathing grew heavier, but they didn't stop. Their faces turned red, blood vessels visible under their thin skin. 100 push-ups. 150. Sub-Commander Kree whispered to Zix Theta. Commander, my scanner shows their heart rates have doubled. Their muscle fibers are experiencing micro-tears. They're damaging themselves. Stop them, urged a Dendari observer. They'll injure themselves permanently. Admiral Chen shook her head. This is perfectly normal. Human muscles grow stronger by being damaged and rebuilding. It's how we adapt. 200 push-ups. Some recruits' arms were shaking violently now, but still they continued. Roberts showed no mercy. Johnson, is that all you've got? My 3-year-old niece has stronger arms. The recruit named Johnson somehow pushed harder, sweat dripping onto the floor beneath him. Stop, Roberts finally commanded at 250. The recruits immediately jumped to their feet, standing at attention again despite their obvious exhaustion. Burpees. 100, begin. The recruits dropped down, kicked their legs back, did a push-up, jumped their legs forward, then leaped into the air with their arms raised. Then down again. The complex movement was repeated over and over, each cycle taking tremendous energy. The Vorthak delegation's crystalline forms were developing stress fractures just from watching. The amount of energy being expended was enormous. Crystal arc. Tom calculated that each human was burning through enough calories to keep a Vorthak functional for a week. After the burpees came something called mountain climbers, where the recruits ran in place while in the push-up position. Then jumping jacks, where they jumped while swinging their arms and legs out and in. Then squat jumps, where they crouched and exploded upward repeatedly. 40 minutes of this continued. Different exercises, each one seemingly designed to cause maximum discomfort. The floor was wet with human sweat. The recruits' gray clothing was soaked through. Their breathing was ragged and harsh. Water break, Roberts announced. You have 30 seconds. The recruits ran to the side of the field where containers of water waited. They drank quickly, efficiently, then ran back to formation. 30 seconds exactly. That was the warm-up, Roberts announced to the assembly. Now we begin actual training. The warm-up? Zix Theta's 4 hands clenched involuntarily. What they had just witnessed would have exhausted his elite guards, and the humans called it warming up. Roberts pointed to the far end of the demonstration area. Equipment had been set up that looked like obstacles. Walls of various heights, ropes hanging from frames, barriers to crawl under, and elevated beams to balance on. Obstacle course, Roberts shouted. Full combat load, move! The recruits ran to equipment containers and began strapping on additional gear. Heavy vests that the computer identified as armor plating, helmets that covered their fragile skulls, packs that weighed 40 Earth pounds each, weapons that, while unloaded, added another 10 pounds. Equipment hanging from belts and straps. How much weight are they carrying? Asked Commander Rillix. Approximately 35 kilograms of equipment, Admiral Chen replied calmly. Standard combat load, 35 kilograms. In Earth gravity. Zix Theta tried to calculate what that would feel like, and his mind recoiled from the result. First squad. Run the course. 10 recruits sprinted toward the obstacles. They had to climb over a wall twice their height, pulling themselves up with raw arm strength while wearing all that weight. They dropped down the other side, landing hard enough that Zix Theta heard their bones rattle. Then under barbed wire, crawling on their bellies through mud that had been added to make it harder, across narrow beams where one wrong step meant falling, up rope climbs that required them to pull their entire body weight, plus the gear up 15 feet. Through tire runs that required precise foot placement at full speed. The first recruit finished in 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Instead of collapsing, she turned around and screamed encouragement at the others still on the course. "Move it, Thompson. Your baby sister could crawl faster than that." "Williams, get your ass over that wall." They encouraged each other through insults and challenges. It made no sense to most of the watching aliens. The Silathi, who valued harmony and cooperation, were particularly disturbed by the aggressive encouragement. All 10 finished. They were exhausted, covered in mud and sweat, breathing like their lungs might explode. Roberts looked at them with what might have been disappointment. Pathetic. My 80-year-old mother could have done it faster. "Second squad, you better do better." The second squad ran. They pushed harder, trying to beat the first squad's times.
One recruit fell from the balance beam and had to start that obstacle over.
Another's grip slipped on the rope climb and he fell 10 feet, landing hard. He immediately got up and climbed again, his hands now bloody from the rope burn. "Medical attention required," announced a Dendari medical officer, moving toward the field. "Negative," Roberts said, blocking the way. "He's fine." "Fine?" The human was bleeding. His hands were torn open, but he kept climbing, blood making the rope slippery until he reached the top. When the second squad finished, Roberts had them do push-ups as punishment for being slower than the first squad. The first squad had to do push-ups too, for not being fast enough to properly motivate the second squad. This continued for 2 hours. The obstacle course was run again and again. Then they did something called log carries, where 5 recruits had to work together to carry massive wooden beams while running. The logs weighed 200 pounds each. They ran for a mile carrying them, their legs shaking, sweat pouring off them like rain. "Their body temperature has risen to dangerous levels," reported the medical scanner. "Core temperature approaching 40 degrees Celsius. "That's normal for intense exercise," Admiral Chen said. "Humans can sustain core temperatures that would kill most species. It's one of our adaptations." Next came combat drills. The recruits had to crawl through mud while instructors fired weapons over their heads. The weapons were loaded with non-lethal training rounds, but they were loud. Explosively loud. Each shot made the other species flinch. The humans crawled through it, their faces pressed into the mud when the shots came too close. Then smoke grenades were deployed. The recruits had to navigate the obstacle course again, but now they couldn't see more than a foot in front of them. They crashed into obstacles, fell off beams, ran into each other, but they kept going. Stress positions. Roberts commanded next. The recruits had to hold uncomfortable positions for extended periods. Squatting with arms extended, holding heavy weights above their heads, planking with weight on their backs. Their muscles shook. Some recruits' legs gave out and they collapsed, only to force themselves back into position. One recruit vomited from the exertion. He wiped his mouth and continued. Another's nose started bleeding from the pressure. She ignored it, blood running down her face as she held a 90-pound weight above her head. The Corvan warriors were backing away from the demonstration field now. This wasn't training. This was systematic destruction. These humans were breaking their own young and calling it basic preparation. How long does a training session like this last? 6 Theta found himself asking. This is just the morning session, Roberts said, overhearing. "We do this before breakfast.
After they eat, we do classroom instruction for tactics and strategy.
Then afternoon physical training. Then evening combat drills. Then night operations training. Every day?" The question came from multiple species at once. "Every day for 13 weeks, Roberts confirmed, though it gets harder as they progress. By week 8, they're doing this on 3 hours of sleep while carrying twice the weight." A Silathi representative's psychic presence flickered with horror. "You deprive them of sleep? That's recognized as torture by galactic conventions." "It's training," Roberts said simply. "In combat, you don't get to sleep when you're tired. You sleep when you're dead or when the mission's done." The demonstration was entering its 4th hour. The recruits looked like they had been through actual combat. They were injured, exhausted, dehydrated, and pushed beyond what any reasonable species would consider safe limits, but they were still standing. The assembly hall had grown quiet. Many of the alien representatives had moved even further from the demonstration field, as if distance could protect them from what they were witnessing. The human recruits stood in formation, their bodies trembling from exhaustion, covered in mud, sweat, and blood. Yet they remained at attention, eyes forward, waiting for their next command. High Chancellor Vexara's telepathic presence rippled with distress. She floated closer to Admiral Chen, her translucent form pulsing with agitation. Admiral, surely this is enough. Your recruits have proven their endurance. There is no need to damage them further. Chen's expression remained calm. Chancellor, with respect, you haven't seen anything yet. Sergeant Major Roberts has been taking it easy on them because this is a demonstration. Would you like to see what their actual training looks like? Taking it easy? 6 Theta's translator must have malfunctioned. What they had witnessed over the last 4 hours was Roberts being gentle. Recruits, Roberts bellowed. The nice aliens think you've had enough. What do you say to that? We can go all day, Sergeant Major. They shouted in unison, though their voices cracked from exhaustion. Damn right you can. Johnson, front and center. The recruit named Johnson ran forward. He was one of the younger ones, perhaps 20 Earth years old. His left eye was swollen shut from where he'd hit an obstacle, and his uniform was more mud than fabric. Tell these representatives about Hell Week, Johnson. Johnson turned to face the assembly. When he spoke, his voice was steady despite his obvious fatigue. Hell Week is part of our Special Forces selection, sir. Navy SEAL training. Candidates undergo 5.5 days of continuous physical training with no sleep. No sleep? For 5 days? Several species made sounds of disbelief. Maximum of 4 hours of sleep total, Johnson continued, over the entire 5.5 days. Constant physical exercise. Cold water immersion. Hypothermia is common. Hallucinations begin around day 3. 75% of candidates quit. Quit? Asked Crystallark Tom. Or die. Quit, sir. Medical staff monitors everything. But people rarely die. They just break mentally before they break physically. Roberts nodded approvingly. Johnson here wants to try for SEALs after basic. Don't you, son? Yes, Sergeant Major. Get back in line. Roberts turned to address the assembly. Every human military has something like Hell Week. Rangers have their own version. Marine Force Recon, Army Special Forces, Air Force Pararescue, each one designed to push humans past their breaking point, to find the ones who refuse to break. A mechanid representative, their metallic form humming with confusion, asked, "What is the purpose of such extreme selection? Surely you lose many capable soldiers through injury." "We heal," Roberts said simply. "Broken bones mend in weeks. Torn muscles rebuild stronger. Even traumatic brain injuries humans often recover from. We're built to survive damage that would be fatal to most of you." To demonstrate his point, Roberts called forward a recruit named Martinez. She had a deep gash on her shin from the obstacle course, blood still seeping through a makeshift bandage. "Martinez, when did you get that?" "First run through the course, Sergeant Major. About 3 hours ago." Roberts unwrapped the bandage. The assembled aliens recoiled. The wound was deep enough to see muscle tissue. It needed immediate medical attention by any civilized standard. "Does it hurt, Martinez?" "Yes, Sergeant Major." "Can you continue?" "Yes, Sergeant Major." Roberts rewrapped the wound with fresh bandage. "She'll get proper medical treatment after training. The wound will heal completely in 2 weeks. Won't even leave much of a scar." The Dendari representative's plant-like form rustled with distress. "You're describing regeneration abilities. That's not possible for mammalian species." "Not regeneration," Chen corrected. "Just very efficient healing. Our bodies flood injury sites with platelets to stop bleeding, white blood cells to prevent infection, and growth factors to rebuild tissue. We scar, but we survive." Roberts decided to continue the demonstration. "Recruits, we're going to show our guests a taste of water training. Get the tanks." The recruits ran to drag large water tanks into the demonstration area. They were filled with ice water, the temperature barely above freezing. 6 Theta's thermal sensors screamed warnings just from proximity to the containers. "Everyone in!" The recruits climbed into the tanks, gasping as the cold water hit their overheated bodies. Their skin immediately turned pale, their lips blue. They shivered violently, their teeth chattering loud enough for everyone to hear. Swimming exercises. "Begin!" In the freezing water, the recruits began doing exercises. They had to tread water while holding weights above their heads. They had to dive to the bottom and retrieve objects. They had to hold their breath for extended periods while instructors held them under. One recruit's body began shaking so violently he couldn't control his movements. Roberts pulled him out, but only long enough for a medical scan to confirm he wasn't in immediate danger, then ordered him back in. "Hypothermia training," Roberts explained to the horrified audience. "Humans can function with core body temperatures that would shut down most mammalian species. We need to know their limits." After 20 minutes in the ice water, the recruits were allowed out. They couldn't stop shivering. Some couldn't feel their extremities, but they immediately had to do jumping jacks to warm up, then push-ups, then run laps around the demonstration area. Your species evolved in tropical climates, observed a researcher from the Altarian contingent. This cold tolerance makes no evolutionary sense. Humans spread to every climate on Earth, Chen explained. From Arctic ice to desert heat, we adapt to whatever environment we're in. These recruits will also train in desert conditions, jungle conditions, mountain conditions. By the end of basic training, they can survive and fight anywhere. Roberts had moved on to sleep deprivation training. Recruits, you have 2 minutes to solve these tactical problems. He projected complex battle scenarios onto screens. Wrong answers mean everyone does push-ups. Begin! The exhausted recruits tried to focus on the problems. Their brains were foggy from fatigue, but they had to think through complex scenarios involving multiple variables. Some got them wrong. Everyone did push-ups. They were given new problems, harder ones, with less time to solve them. In combat, Roberts explained, you need to make life or death decisions while exhausted, injured, and under fire. If you can't think clearly after 40 hours without sleep, you're dead. One recruit collapsed during the push-ups. He simply couldn't get up. 2 others immediately grabbed him and held him in push-up position, taking his weight on top of their own. Why? Asked a Salathi observer. Why help him when it makes their own suffering worse? Because that's what humans do, Roberts said with something like pride in his voice. We don't leave anyone behind, ever. Those 2 recruits would rather die than let their teammate fail alone. The demonstration moved into its 6th hour. Roberts introduced new tortures. Stress shooting, where recruits had to hit targets while their heart rates were above 180 beats per minute. Combatives training, where exhausted recruits had to fight each other hand to hand. Weighted marches, where they had to walk for miles carrying packs that weighed more than half their body weight. During the combatives training, one recruit's nose was broken. Blood streamed down his face. The medical officer reset it without anesthesia, packed it with gauze, and sent him back to fighting. Another had her shoulder dislocated. It was popped back into place and she continued with one arm immobilized. These are children, whispered Commander Rilix. You're destroying your own children. These are volunteers, Chen corrected. Every single one chose to be here. They can quit anytime they want. Ring a bell and they're out. No questions asked, no shame attached. But look at them. Not one has quit. Indeed, despite everything, all 20 recruits were still participating. Some were helping others. Some could barely stand. But all were still trying. Roberts gathered the recruits for one final exercise. Battlefield casualty simulation. Thompson, Williams, Johnson, your casualties. Everyone else, get them to safety. The 3 named recruits went limp, pretending to be unconscious. Each weighed between 150 and 200 pounds. The other 17, already exhausted beyond reason, had to carry them through the obstacle course. It was brutal to watch. The carriers stumbled, fell, got back up. They took turns when someone's strength gave out. They problem-solved on the fly, figuring out the most efficient ways to move their wounded comrades over walls and under obstacles. It took them 40 minutes to get all 3 through the course. When it was done, they collapsed in a heap, literally piled on top of each other, too exhausted to maintain formation. But they had succeeded. They had left no one behind. Roberts walked over to the pile of exhausted recruits. On your feet. Somehow, impossibly, they stood. They swayed. Some held each other up, but they stood. Tell our guests, Roberts said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. What's the most important thing you've learned in training? The recruits answered in unison, their voices hoarse but clear. The only easy day was yesterday, Sergeant Major. And what do we say to pain? Pain is weakness leaving the body, Sergeant Major. And what do we say to death? Not today, Sergeant Major. Roberts turned to the assembly. The environmental field finally powered down, returning the demonstration area to standard galactic conditions. The human recruits immediately looked uncomfortable in the lighter gravity, taking a moment to adjust their balance. Several species noticed how the humans had to consciously control their movements, as if they might accidentally launch themselves into the ceiling with a normal step. Admiral Chen turned to address the assembly. Recruits dismissed. Get medical attention, food, and rest. Be ready for evening training at 1800 hours. The recruits saluted and marched out, some limping, others supporting injured squad mates, but all moving under their own power. As they left, one could be heard saying to another, "That was actually kind of fun. Better than yesterday's drill with the live explosives." Live explosives. Yesterday, the casual way it was mentioned sent another wave of disbelief through the assembled aliens. High Chancellor Vexara's telepathic presence was deeply disturbed. Her thoughts leaking through to those nearby in waves of confusion and fear. She floated directly in front of Admiral Chen, her translucent form flickering with agitation. "Admiral, I must ask directly, is this training standardized across your entire military?" Chen nodded. "This is the minimum standard. Every human soldier, marine, sailor, and airman goes through some version of this. Police forces have similar training. Even our civilian emergency responders train like this." "Your civilians?" Crystal Arc Tom's harmonic voice cracked, creating discordant notes. "Firefighters run into burning buildings carrying 100 pounds of gear. Emergency medical responders work 36-hour shifts without sleep. Search and rescue teams train to operate in conditions that would kill most humans, just to save other humans who got stuck in those conditions." Sergeant Major Roberts had remained in the demonstration area, cleaning up the equipment. He overheard and added, "My brother's a firefighter. Their training includes being locked in a burning building while wearing blacked-out masks, so they learn to navigate by touch and sound alone. Temperature gets hot enough to melt most synthetic materials. They call it confidence training." Commander Zix Theta found himself studying the two humans more carefully. Both Chen and Roberts showed numerous scars on their exposed skin. Roberts was missing the tip of one finger. Chen had burn marks on her neck that disappeared under her uniform. These weren't just instructors. They had lived through combat that had marked them permanently. "How many humans die in this training?" asked the Dendari representative, their plant-like form having turned a shade that indicated deep distress. "Globally, maybe a few dozen per year out of millions who go through training," Chen replied. "More die in training accidents than from the actual training itself. Vehicle crashes, equipment failures, that sort of thing. A few dozen?" The Salathi's telepathic shock was palpable. "You find this acceptable?" Robert stepped forward, his expression serious for once. "Let me explain something about humans. Our home planet Earth has a saying, 'The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war.' Every recruit who goes through this hell does it so they can survive real combat, and more importantly, so they can keep their squad mates alive. But the damage to their bodies," protested a medical officer from the Altarian delegation. "The long-term consequences must be severe." "Sure," Roberts admitted. "Most career soldiers have bad knees by 40. Back problems are common. Traumatic brain injuries from concussions can cause issues later. But that's 40 years of being combat effective. And our medical technology keeps improving." Chen pulled up a holographic display. "Let me show you something. These are statistics from our last major conflict, before we achieved faster-than-light travel." The display showed casualty figures and survival rates. The aliens leaned in, trying to understand the numbers. "In our Second World War," Chen explained, "a soldier who was wounded but made it to a medical facility had a 95% survival rate. That was with 1940s technology. Today, if one of our soldiers is wounded but still breathing when medical gets to them, they have a 99.3% chance of survival." "Even with severe trauma?" asked Crystal Arc Tom. "We've had soldiers survive direct hits from explosive devices that removed multiple limbs. Soldiers who've had their hearts stopped for several minutes and been brought back. Traumatic brain injuries that would be instantly fatal to most species. We just keep fixing them and sending them back if they want to go." Roberts pulled up his own display. "Here's what you really need to understand. Private Johnson, who you met earlier, his older brother is a Navy SEAL. Let me tell you about SEAL training." The display showed training footage that made what they had just witnessed look tame. Humans underwater for impossible lengths of time, swimming for miles in freezing ocean water, carrying boats above their heads for hours while running on sand, being deliberately drowned and resuscitated as part of pool competency testing. 6 months of initial training, Roberts narrated. Then 18 months of additional specialized training. Sniper school, where they lie still for days to take a single shot. Explosives training, where they learn to build bombs out of household materials. Language school, where they become fluent in multiple languages while sleep-deprived. Survival school, where they're dropped in hostile environments with nothing and have to survive for weeks. And the truly insane part, Chen added, is that we have thousands of volunteers trying to get into these programs every year. The selection process has to turn away people who are already elite soldiers because they're not quite elite enough. Sub-Commander Kree had been reviewing his scans of the training session. Commander Zix Theta, I've analyzed their performance metrics. If these are truly their untrained recruits, then their trained soldiers would be unstoppable, Zix Theta finished. The word hung in the air like a threat. Not unstoppable, Chen corrected. Just very, very hard to stop. We've lost wars before, but never because our soldiers weren't tough enough. Usually because we were outnumbered or out-equipped. That won't be a problem in the coalition. A new thought occurred to the Salathi representative. Your neural patterns during the demonstration. You showed no distress watching your young sufferer. How? Chen and Roberts exchanged a look. Roberts answered, because we've been through worse, both of us. Every human military instructor has been through everything they put their recruits through and more. I did Hell Week 15 years ago, Chen said quietly. 5.5 days of pure agony. I hallucinated that the ocean was talking to me by day 4. I thought my dead grandmother was swimming next to me. But I didn't ring the bell. Neither did Roberts. Rangers, Roberts said simply. 61 days of hunger, exhaustion, and pain. Lost 40 pounds. 8 bugs to survive. Had to climb a mountain with broken ribs from a training accident. Still finished. The assembly had gone completely silent. These 2 humans, who looked so small and fragile compared to most species present, had endured tortures that would have killed most sapient beings, and they spoke of it casually as if it was just something one did. There's something else, Chen said, pulling up a new display. This is important for you all to understand. Human military training isn't just about physical toughness. It's about mental conditioning. The display showed brain scans of humans before and after military training. We literally rewire our brains. The fear response gets partially suppressed. Pain becomes something you acknowledge but don't obey. Exhaustion becomes background noise. We train our brains to function under conditions that should shut down higher reasoning. That's not training, whispered a Dendari observer. That's transformation into something else. Yes, Roberts agreed bluntly. We take normal humans and turn them into weapons. Living, breathing, thinking weapons who can operate in any environment under any conditions against any enemy. But they can turn it off, Chen added quickly. Our soldiers come home and become normal citizens again. They raise families, work regular jobs, contribute to society. The conditioning doesn't break them. It just adds capabilities. Commander Rilix of the Altarian fleet had been silent for a long time. Now he spoke up. You said earlier that special forces training could last years. What could possibly take years? Roberts grinned and several species stepped back from what looked like a threat display. Oh, that's the fun stuff. Special forces aren't just tough. They're smart. They learn advanced mathematics for artillery calculations, chemistry for explosives, psychology for interrogation resistance, multiple languages, cultural studies so they can blend in anywhere, field medicine so they can perform surgery on themselves if needed. Surgery on themselves? The medical officer's voice was faint. Had a buddy who removed his own appendix in the field once, Roberts said casually. No medic available and it was about to burst. Talked himself through it over radio with a doctor. Stitched himself up, walked 8 miles to extraction. Chen pulled up more displays. Modern Special Forces soldiers are trained in electronic warfare, cyber operations, advanced piloting, underwater operations, high-altitude operations, Arctic warfare, desert warfare, jungle warfare, urban warfare, space warfare now that we have that capability. Each environment requires different training, Roberts continued. In the Arctic, they learn to build shelters from ice, hunt and eat raw seal meat, navigate in whiteout conditions. Commander Zix Theta stood before the assembled representatives, his 4 arms clasped behind his back in a gesture of deep contemplation. The demonstration had ended an hour ago, but the discussion continued. Every species present was recalculating their understanding of humanity and what it meant for the coalition. I call for a formal assessment, Zix Theta announced. We must determine how to integrate human forces into our command structure. High Chancellor Vexara floated to the center of the room. Her telepathic presence was carefully controlled now, but underneath everyone could sense her uncertainty. The humans have demonstrated capabilities we did not anticipate. This changes our strategic planning entirely. Admiral Chen stood with Sergeant Major Roberts at her side. They waited patiently as the other species discussed among themselves. The humans seemed unconcerned by the whispered conversations and worried glances being thrown their way. Perhaps, suggested Commander Rilex of the Altarian fleet, the humans should form their own separate division, operating independently from the rest of our forces. No, Chen said firmly. That would be inefficient. Our forces work best when integrated with others. We can serve as shock troops, certainly, but we're also valuable as trainers, medics, and support personnel. Trainers? Crystallark Tom's harmonic voice held a note of alarm. You would subject other species to your training methods? Roberts actually laughed. No, that would kill most of you. But we can teach mental resilience, tactical planning, and help other species push past their perceived limits safely. We're very good at adapting our methods to different physiologies. A younger Salathi representative floated forward. I have a question that perhaps seems obvious but must be asked. If humans are so capable, why do you need the coalition at all? Chen's expression grew serious. Because for all our physical capabilities, we're new to space. We have 20 colonies and maybe 50 million humans spread across them. The Devourers have consumed entire systems with billions of inhabitants. We can't fight them alone no matter how tough our soldiers are. Also, Roberts added, we're not invincible. We die to energy weapons same as anyone else. A little harder to kill maybe, but dead is dead. And the Devourers have numbers we can't match. Zix Theta's tactical mind was already working through possibilities. Your soldiers could serve as breakthrough units. When our lines need to punch through enemy defenses, human troops could create the opening. Or as rear guard, suggested another Corvan officer. If we need forces to hold a position while others retreat, humans could survive conditions that would force others to withdraw. Chen nodded. We're also useful for hostile environment operations. Planets with high radiation, extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres. Where your forces would need heavy environmental suits, we might be able to operate with minimal protection. There's another consideration, Roberts said. Search and rescue. Our medics are trained to go into the worst conditions to retrieve wounded. Human combat medics will run through active fire zones, toxic environments, whatever it takes to reach injured soldiers. And we don't just save humans. We'll save anyone. The Dendari representative rustled their leaves thoughtfully. You would risk human lives to save non-humans? Of course, Chen said, as if the question was absurd. Once we're in the coalition, you're all our brothers and sisters in arms. We don't leave anyone behind. This statement caused another ripple of discussion. The concept of risking their own soldiers to save others was not unknown, but the human commitment to it seemed absolute. I have studied your history, said Crystallark Tom. Humans have a disturbing tendency toward warfare among yourselves. How do we know you won't turn these capabilities against coalition members? Roberts and Chen exchanged a look. Chen answered carefully. You're right that humans have fought each other throughout our history, but we've also shown the ability to unite against common threats. Once we commit to an alliance, we honor it. Our word is our bond. Besides, Roberts added with his unsettling grin, fighting the Devourers will give us plenty of outlet for our aggressive tendencies. We're actually looking forward to it. Looking forward to fighting the Devourers. Every other species present considered the coming conflict with dread and necessity. The humans anticipated it. Sub-Commander Kree had been running calculations on his tactical display. Commander, if we deploy human forces as suggested, using them for breakthrough operations and hostile environment missions, we could reduce overall coalition casualties by approximately 40%. 40%? Zix Theta turned to study the calculations. That seems optimistic. It accounts for human durability and their recovery rates, Kree explained. A human soldier who survives an injury that would kill us is back in combat within weeks. They can also operate continuously for longer periods, reducing the need for rotation cycles. High Chancellor Vexara made a decision. I propose we create a new classification within coalition forces. Designation Extreme Environment Assault Forces. The humans would form the core of these units with volunteers from other species who wish to train with them. Volunteers? Asked a Corvan warrior. Who would volunteer for that? To everyone's surprise, several hands, tentacles, and appendages raised around the room. Young warriors from various species, those who had watched the demonstration with fascination rather than horror. I would learn their methods, said a young Corvan soldier. Not the physical training, obviously, but the mental conditioning. The ability to continue when everything seems lost. Roberts looked at the young soldier with something like approval. We can work with that. Mental toughness doesn't require being human. It just requires being willing to suffer and grow from it. Admiral Chen pulled up a new holographic display. If you're serious about integration, I should show you our complete force structure. The display showed the full scope of human military organization. The numbers were smaller than other species, but the specialization was incredible. Mountain divisions trained for high-altitude combat. Submarine forces that operated in the depths of water worlds. Airborne units that dropped from orbit in individual pods. Arctic specialists who could survive and fight in temperatures that would freeze most species solid in minutes. We also have something else, Chen added. Military working animals. Animals? The concept was so primitive that several species didn't have a proper translation for it. Dogs primarily, Chen explained. Creatures that evolved alongside humans. They can detect chemicals, track targets, and fight alongside our soldiers. Some are trained to jump from aircraft with their handlers. Roberts pulled up an image of a German shepherd wearing tactical gear. This is Rex. He's completed more combat missions than most soldiers. He can detect explosives, track enemies for miles, and has been trained to attack on command. He's also trained to bring medical supplies to wounded soldiers under fire. The alien stared at the image. The creature looked as dangerous as its human partners. You train other species from your planet to fight? Asked the Salethi representative. Just dogs and occasionally a few others, Roberts said. They volunteer in their own way. Dogs and humans have been fighting together for thousands of years. This was too much for some representatives. Not only were humans themselves terrifying warriors, but they had weaponized other creatures from their death world. There's one more thing, Chen said. Our civilians. Your civilians? Zix Theta asked, confused. What about them? Many of our civilians are former military. In an emergency, we could mobilize millions of trained fighters who are currently working civilian jobs. They stay in shape, maintain their skills, and can be recalled if needed. Every human colony also has militia units, Roberts added. Civilians who train on weekends just in case. Even our entertainment includes combat sports. Humans pay money to watch other humans fight for fun. For fun. They fought for fun. Commander Rilix had been quiet for a while. Now he spoke up. I motion to accept humanity's proposal for integration. Their forces will serve as special assault units, trainers, and hostile environment specialists. Seconded, said Crystal Arc Tom, though his harmonic voice carried reluctance. The vote was called. It was unanimous, though some voted more out of fear of having humans as enemies than enthusiasm for having them as allies. As the formal voting concluded, a communication alert sounded. High Chancellor Vexara received the message, her telepathic presence immediately flooding with alarm. The Devourers, she announced. They've attacked the outer colony of Kepler 442b. The garrison is requesting immediate reinforcement. The room erupted into concerned discussion. Kepler 442b was 3 days away by fastest FTL. By the time any force arrived, it would likely be too late. Admiral Chen stood up. We have a ship in that sector. The UES Perseverance with a company of Marines aboard. They can be there in 18 hours. 18 hours? The speed was impossible by known FTL calculations. We've been working on engine modifications, Chen said simply, taking a few risks with power output that most species would consider unsafe. Of course they had. Humans would risk reactor overload for a speed advantage. One company against a Devourer invasion force? Zix Theta questioned. That's suicide. Roberts grinned again. Admiral, those are Force Recon Marines, aren't they?